So right now, I think everybody here appreciates that the government negotiations have been quite slow so that you can be here. And we definitely all think that this is on purpose. Because this is essential, and you have been very vocal on the question of artificial intelligence, children and young people. So would you just get us started in how do you see young people and artificial intelligence? Is there a relationship? Is there no relationship? What kind of relationship, if so?
Okay, first of all, thank you for arranging this extremely important venue. We have totally underestimated the power of tech giants, social media, and now AI. So as in many other situations and cases, we lag behind in Europe and as democracies. Let me just point some few things to begin with. AI has a great potential. Let me start by that. There is a lot of perspective in this, especially when it comes to health care and when it comes to in public and in private sector to move people from office work to more important work relations between people. Now I have said something positive. With everybody, remember that when I'm starting my speech. This is dangerous stuff. It's unregulated and we don't understand what is at stake. And this is not a question about technology. If we think AI is simply just a new technology, we misunderstand everything. It's above that. And it is dangerous, first of all, because there is a total established link between power, political power, capital, tech giants, and AI. And the purpose of this is undermining democracy. That's the goal. Because the people who are developing this stuff are against democracy. This is what is at stake. I met Sam Altman a couple of years ago. I spent hours with him. And at the end of the discussion, I said to him, "You have created a monster." And he said, "Yes. And now it's up to you to find out how to deal with it." That is where we are. Let me also put this into your discussion today. This is not about skills. You cannot educate us to understand AI and to handle it. If we think it's only a question about education and skills and technology understanding and so on, we will fail. You have to regulate. And you have to put democracy before anything else. If we don't understand that, then we will waste the next couple of years and the consequences will be huge. Remember, I said something positive in the beginning because I have understood that it's very important as a modern politician. You have to believe in the future and hope and blah, 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 blah. And it's all very nice, but this is dangerous stuff. And for me, the link and the combination of power, especially in the US, political power, money, and the tech giant, dangerous stuff. But secondly, and this is also from a Danish perspective, very important, because we are still one of the few societies where people actually believe in each other. So when we listen to the news in the radio, if we open a newspaper, if you listen to a prime minister, our feeling is that, well, I can trust what I read, what I listen to, what I see. But in the near future, everybody has to think the other way around. Maybe this is fake news. Maybe this picture is not for real. Maybe the voice and the words is not linked. And that will undermine the faith in humanity. Dangerous stuff.
But probably we are there already, partly. Because as you said, Denmark is one of the few societies where trust is still the basics. So I think we fell asleep at the wheel and allowed social media access to children and young people. Now, having learned from that, and also thinking about the first industrial revolution, that is about 200 years ago, we're still cleaning up after that. What have we learned? What has lawmakers, regulators, enforcers learned from what we have seen, not only in distant history, but also in recent history?
It's very difficult in 2026 when you look at how things are evolving to ask me what have we learned, because it seems to me that we are repeating many of the historical mistakes that we have made. And the old world order that many of us really believed in, either it's changing rapidly into the worse, or it has simply disappeared, and then we have to build up again. Well, it's a good question. I'm not sure I can answer it, but I see something positive, because I have been extremely skeptical about social media, about the smartphone and the role of the digital area in our schools and so on. And when I began to have this discussion in Denmark, people looked at me like I were, something from a historical background. And then now I feel that things are changing, because I don't think there are any parents left who believes it's a good idea to give a kid a smartphone anymore. People do it, but I don't think anybody believes that that. I think the majority now, at least quietly, recognize that we made a big mistake, and that the future will punish us, that we let our kids alone in their bed with a smartphone instead of other human beings. And I know that some of you young people will disagree with me, of course. So I think we are starting to learn the damages it has caused, and the price we're going to pay, and the mental crisis among our kids. I will say 90% of it belongs to the smartphone and the social media, and not anything else. But I don't think we are there yet where people dares to see what is going on.
But probably the disagreement is a very good starting point for a conversation about what to do, because artificial intelligence will be a fact of life. It will not go away. So how, on the one hand,
but you have to protect kids.
Exactly, that is what I'm getting to. On the one hand side, how to protect, while at the same time give agency and empowerment. Because also when we say, as Ursula von der Leyen said earlier this morning, we want to put in a delay, you cannot just sort of cold enter the world, because also you will have an app for your ticket for the bus. You will have an app for your doctor's appointment. Your school will have an app for what is the homework. So somehow kids will have a presence in the digital world. But one thing I think was really obvious, and that is the leadership. You may say that people thought that it was old-fashioned to have that kind of attitude towards screens and smartphones. I don't think so. I think the Danish leadership has actually also been part of changing the attitude in Europe. So what kind of relationship would you expect, or what kind of actions would you expect in our European democracy, following up on the initiatives that the Danish presidency actually set afloat? Because your colleagues, when you're in the European Council, I would expect them to agree with you.
Yeah, but you can, if a couple of years ago, it would be totally, impossible to have a discussion about among European leaders about the screen and kids. And today it is on our agenda. So it's you're totally right. It's a signal that things are rapidly changing, and more countries are now talking about, banning social media until a certain age and so on. But this question about empowerment is interesting, because the question is, what builds empowerment? How do you empower kids and young people to be strong citizens, strong human beings? I don't think the screen can participate in that at all. And our problem is that you get the screen before you are empowered. It has to go the other way around, because, I mean, it has always been difficult to be a young person. Always. At least part of growing up can be difficult. The problem is that you have the screen as your friend before you are building friendships, before you know who you are, before you have the power to take on the right decisions. And I mean, in many other areas, we are protecting our kids against something because we know it is wrong to them. You said, Johanna, I remember a couple of years ago, that it's strange because if you are somewhere where you don't know the surroundings as a parent, you would look after your kids. You not just go to another city where you don't know anybody and then you say, okay, go out and play for the next 3 hours. Actually, it would be good if we could allow our kids to play more alone again, as we did back in time. But we would not do that. But when it comes to the digital playground, they are just, I mean, they are just totally on their own, looking at things that they should not see, get in contact with grown-ups that they should not be in contact with, and so and so and so. So I think we have to put it the other way around, to protect them against what is going on inside the platforms, like we regulate alcohol or cigarettes and so on. If I should be, no, I'm still acting prime minister, so I won't say what I was going to say. But I mean, if I was not the acting prime minister, I would say if I had small kids today, I would rather have them smoking than allowing them to stay on their own on the social media. But I am acting prime minister, so I will not say that. But you know, there is something wrong with us, because as grown-ups, as politicians, as representatives for kids and so on, we still look in the old threats. But there is a new one, and it's much more present. I mean, when young girls in Denmark, I think in average, they spend 3, 4, 5 hours a day. And then they come and tell us they are stressed. Yes, of course, you are stressed when you spend 3, 4, 5 hours a day looking at your screen instead of being together with other people.
But on the example of smoking, that is one of the things that really gives me confidence that we can change this. Because 20 years ago, we would be smoking indoor. And there would be ashtrays everywhere. And, you know, us who were smokers, we would say, oh, we're going to charge you for your secondhand smoking because it's really expensive. But we changed all that. Now it's unheard of. First, we made it very difficult to find a place to smoke. We made cigarettes much more expensive. And we made it socially uncomfortable. So, and we changed that within a relatively short time frame. How to do the same thing, but in a much, much shorter time frame. Since we have the evidence, and we have sufficient evidence to say, now we know the risk, and with, you know, sound judgment, we see that we cannot continue as we are.
But I have one measure, and it's totally for free. If all parents could agree that they will not be the first parent to allow a smartphone for their kids in the class, because this is how it happens. So the kids come home, and you can all recognize this, and saying, all the other kids in my class now have a smartphone. I'm the only one, and it's simply not possible to exist without social media. And then, of course, it is difficult for the parents. Okay, you will be lonesome, and you will sit alone, and you cannot be in contact, and so on. And suddenly everybody in the class have a smartphone. So if all parents could say, we will not be the first one.
And the probability of that to happen? Huh? The probability for that to happen?
No, but I mean, I think, I'm not saying it will happen tomorrow, but I think we have to recognize how dangerous this is and the harm that our kids, I mean, it's really, you know, if you go to a cinema in Denmark, you will still see that we have movies that are not allowed to young people below the age of something. But everything they can see in that movie, they will be faced with at least on a weekly basis on their own. So it's like we don't understand what's going on in there. So I think parents need to talk, but we have to take responsibility.
Exactly.
And that is one of the difficulties in cooperating with more liberal parties as a social democrat, because there is still this idea of, well, if the people just, get the right skills, then they will manage. But, and I don't think we will disagree, Margrethe, but when you look at, the only reason why social media wants to be a part of our kids' life is because of commercials. It's the only reason. It's not because they are, waking up in the morning saying, what can we do for the kids in Denmark, on Greece? They don't care about our kids. So the only reason why they're doing it is because they earn a lot of money on them. And therefore, the most important thing is political will and strength to regulate. The algorithms, the time that you can spend on the screen, when you are there. I'm really glad that we have now decided in Denmark to get rid of the phones in our schools. But if you look at a school in Denmark, when the kids are off, they all goes like this. They walk from the school literally like this. It's not difficult to understand, because when they look at the parents, they're sitting like this. When they are in a restaurant, people are sitting like this. So I think we need to regulate, and of course it has to be on a European and on a global level. So age level, algorithms, and the reels is a problem in itself, because it will never stop. And we are all addicted to it, or at least the most of us are at some point, even though none of us wants to admit that we spend too much time on the screen, all of us.
So, good news. We get the age verification app in Denmark before summer.
Yeah.
Great news. Yeah. We have the Digital Services Act that actually asks of platforms to be safe to use. We have actually some legislation that will enable this. To what degree do you think that should be enforced, also when you have pushback from politicians in the country where these platforms have their home?
I have some experiences with some of those politicians. And yes, of course, there will be a pushback, because this is much bigger than a question about social media and kids. This is a question about power, raw power, nothing else, actually. So yeah, there will be a pushback, but this is a question about protecting our kids. It's a question about protecting our democracies. And therefore, it's a question about protecting the values we have based our continent on. So this is the real fight in the coming years. And much more is at stake than what the eyes can see. So yes, there will be a pushback, and then you, as in other issues where there is a pushback, then you have to stand up for the right thing to do.
You heard it here
Otherwise,
first.
you lose.
And I think that is exactly the way to end this conversation. Because as you started out, this is about a combination of power, of money, of algorithms, of a very, very, very strong technology. And that will ruin our democracy if it's not being held responsible.
But can I add just one thing, and then I will leave you? But I'm pretty glad that people are talking about our Greenlandic moment in Europe in January. Because when we were threatened by US, we stood up in our own very quiet way, just simply saying, no, you cannot take over another country. The Greenlandic people have the right for self-determination, and everybody, even though you are the greatest power, have to respect territorial integrity and our sovereign status as the Kingdom of Denmark. And then, you remember, the European countries stood up with us, and those who helped us directly were threatened as well. And then Europe responded, okay, if you are going to add tariffs on us for standing up for what we have been together in protecting for so many years, we will give you a pushback. We will do exactly the same. And then something changed. So if we think about the Greenlandic moment in January, and see that as an opportunity for Europe. Not to, of course, ask for conflicts with us, because that's not the way we work. But if people want conflict with us, then we're gonna respond together, collectively, standing up for what we believe in. That is where we are, unfortunately.
But that is getting our priorities right. And this is the functioning Prime Minister of Denmark. Thank you very, very much. Now, move on.